She had that personality that just sparkled. She had this long, flowing, beautiful hair, just a little curl to it. She had eyelashes were so long, they seemed unreal. Even her eyes, they sparkled like stars on a dark night. Her skin had this gorgeous bronze color to it, and had the suppleness and the texture of a child. Sounds almost too good to be true, doesn't she? Well, there's a reason for that, because she was. You see, much about Angel was really enhanced or fake. Her hair, she had extensions. Her eyelashes, they were fake. She even had contacts that made her eyes sparkle like the stars. She had a spray-on tan, but we must give her credit for the softness and suppleness of her skin because she was a child. You see, she was only 5 years old. You know, reality is not always as it seems. It's usually shinier, brighter, and always greener on the other side. As with Angel, at a very early age, she had the idea, the dream, the fantasy put in her mind by her mother, that of being Miss America one day. One day she would wear that glittering golden tiara that she longed for. You see, it didn't really matter that she was going to have less time to be a child. She'd have even less time for spiritual pursuits, because that was going to be the key to her happiness. That tiara, that title, was going to open doors for her. Well, are such fantasies as these wrong? You know, no matter where we look, wherever we go, there are those that are pushing, selling the dream, the fantasy. No matter what package it comes in. The question is, are we buying? Are we buying into these fantasies, these dreams of this world? Now perhaps I know there might be some of you in the audience today that are thinking, not another talk about things we can't do. Now all we got to do is go to the meetings, say our prayers, read our Bible, and that's it. Well, no, that's not what I'm going to do. Instead, what I want to do is present you with information and evidence, examples of those that did pursue their own way, their own fantasy, and see how it turned out for them. Also, really, you're going to make the decision, ultimately, because really, don't we all make up our own mind and do what we want anyway, regardless of what anyone says to us? Typically, most people will do what they want. So the question you need to ask yourself before you go off and do what you want, or follow one of these fantasies, one of these interesting things of the world, is, will doing these things bring praise to Jehovah God? Will doing any of these things benefit me and my family spiritually? These are important questions we need to ask ourselves. You know, worldly fantasies, they can stir up some very strong and wrong desires within us. It can lead to some really bad things. The Bible describes this process that takes place in the Bible. Let's look at our first scripture today. It's James 1, 14 and 15. It's James 1, 14 and 15. And it says there, but each one is tried by being drawn out and enticed by his own desire. Then the desire, when it has become fertile, gives birth to sin. In turn, sin, when it has been accomplished, brings forth death. So that's a process that takes place in most human beings. Now, let's look at some examples of those that did pursue their own fantasies, their own dreams. Some 3 perfect examples. Let's start out with the perfect angel that decided things weren't quite good enough for him in heaven. He wanted more. He saw that Jehovah had the attention, that Jehovah was being worshipped. And he looked and he wanted that self-importance. He wanted that for himself. And he left his natural position and he chased after that, being like Jehovah. That's the angel that became Satan the devil. That wasn't his original name, we know. That's what he became. Well, how did that turn out for him? How is it going to turn out for him? Well, Revelation 20:10 tells us, not so much. It's going to be horrible in him. He'd be destroyed. Okay, that's one. What about another perfect example? Eve. Right? She had a few questions put before her, And it got her thinking. The fruit, huh? Be like God? She started to think about it. She started to fantasize about it. We don't know for how long, but it was long enough to get her to want to be like God, knowing good from bad. So she ate. Well, before she paid for her sins, she got her husband Adam on board. And before they both paid for their sins and died, they had offspring. They had children. That inherent sin that Romans talks about. And each and every one of us sits here today paying for that. We die just a little bit every day because of that. So that's not working out so well either, is it? What about the other perfect angels in Noah's day? They were in heaven, they had a great position, but they looked down and they saw something they want, something that was tantalizing to them. They saw the beautiful women on earth, and they said, hey, I want to be a part of that. I want to do that. I want to go down there and marry these women. So they came down, they left their natural position, they came to earth, and they had relations with the beautiful women of the earth, having hybrid offspring, Nephilim, fellers. Well, how did that turn out with them? Doing what they wanted to do. Not so good. Flood came, destroyed all of them, and the angels. What happened to them? Well, let's look at the scripture to see what happened to them. Let's turn to Jude, verse 6. That is Jude, verse 6. And in Jude, verse 6, it says, and the angels that did not keep their original position, but forsook their own proper dwelling place, he has reserved with eternal bonds under dense darkness for the judgment of the great day. Well, that doesn't sound like a lot of fun. So see, we had three different perfect examples that fell into temptation. None of us are perfect today. We could fall into the same temptation. You know, no one ever thinks it's going to be them. You know, we spend a lot of time watching TV. Well, some of us do. There are many that spend many hours watching TV, being entertained by them. Maybe it's talking about materialism. Some promote actual greed on some of these shows. And we know that really these can lead to some really bad things. They can lead to our shipwrecking of our faith, running aground, so to speak. Destruction of our faith. You know, and no one ever thinks it's going to be them. It's always the other guy. Oh, yeah, he wasn't very spiritually strong. He hardly went to meetings, right? It's never the person who says, you know, I'm going to really try to get rich this year so I can make $1 million. I'm not going to go to meetings very often, but then I'm going to fall out of the truth. Pick up smoking. No. That's never the case, is it? It's always the other guy. I'm too smart. I'm an elder. Are you kidding? I'm a pioneer. That couldn't happen to me. Are you exempt? None of us are exempt. Instead of chasing after these things, wouldn't it be more appropriate for us to start making ourselves fit? Spiritually fit. Because we're living in some very difficult times. We're living in the last days. Let me give you an example of a family that did just that. This is an article from the 2007 Watchtower, October issue. It's a story of a family, Henry and Susan, and they were much like us here today. Young families, they had little children, they had 2 daughters. And they were trying to make a living just like us, trying to get through this system. But they decided they wanted to put spiritual things first. They wanted more. They decided to cut their hours back secularly, because they could. It was going to be hard, but they did. And they wanted to do more service. They wanted to go do more of the preaching work, more spiritual things. This was important to them. They wanted to follow the admonition at Matthew 6:33. Put the kingdom first, and all the rest will be added to you. They had faith in that. So they did. And they were quite successful in enjoying it for a while, until one day, a so-called friend says to Susan, said, you know, honey, if you just want a nicer house and some nicer things, if you just make a few sacrifices, you could have them. Well, with friends like that, we don't need enemies. They didn't take the advice, they continued on serving Jehovah, but really what did this person mean by that statement? What she meant was a little less of the spiritual stuff, a little less service, maybe a little more secular work, and you could have nice things like me. You could be like me. Yeah, friends like that, we don't need enemies, right? So they continued on, putting spiritual things first. And eventually their daughters grew up. They actually became full-time evangelizers themselves. And as a family, though, they felt like they missed out on nothing. Absolutely nothing. Instead, really, they felt like it was time well spent, that they actually drew together as a family. They drew closer to Jehovah, spiritually. They benefited. They felt like they gave Jehovah their absolute best. They gave the fruit of the lips, so to speak. That's a term that we don't use often. Most of us are familiar with that. Let's look at the scripture that speaks about the fruit of the lips and how important it really is to us. The scripture is Hebrews 13, 15 and 16. Hebrews 13, 15 and 16. And it says, "Through him let us always offer to God a sacrifice of praise, that is, the fruit of lips, which makes public declaration to his name. Moreover, do not forget the doing of good and sharing of things with others, for with such sacrifices God is well pleased." So I like the scripture because of two things. First, it tells us what the fruit of the lips is. The fruit of the lips are words that we speak in praise of Jehovah God. Well, that could be in a heartfelt prayer. That could be in our enthusiastic answers at the meetings. Or that could be out in our public ministry, speaking about the good news that Jehovah has given us. Second, it brings up an interesting point, how powerful we are. Even though we're really insignificant little specks of dust compared to Jehovah, we have tremendous power. Because we have the ability to make Jehovah God's heart pleased. Make him happy with what we do, with what we say. Think about it, that's powerful. And you know what's interesting is really by putting Jehovah first. In a sense, aren't we really putting ourselves first? That may be puzzling at first, but think about it. By putting Jehovah first, the things he asks us to do, whether it's our ministry or living a clean moral life or anything, doesn't it benefit us? Aren't we better persons for it? Don't we have stronger faith when we go out in service and we talk to other people about Jehovah? Doesn't it build us up? So we're benefiting ourselves. You know, sometimes we have a hard time separating ourselves from the world. We think maybe the world offers us certain securities. Well, is that true? What is the state of the world? Does it really offer securities? Well, let's look at a couple scriptures that will let us know for a fact what it is. Let's first look at Proverbs 18:11. And actually keep your book there because we're going to look at a couple scriptures in Proverbs. What kind of security does it have to offer? Proverbs 18:11. And it says, "The valuable things of the rich are his strong tower, and they're like a protective wall in his imagination." So the things that people strive for, whether it's the houses, their properties, their riches, the solid gold bars you have hidden in a safe somewhere, is that security? It says, sure, right here.